Thor Love and Thunder is the gayest Marvel movie yet, written and directed by a man with the mind of a 7-year-old. And that's not even my take on the movie, that's what the people responsible for selling it to us are saying. I mean really, if that doesn't get arses in seats, then I just don't know what will.
Flip too hard, damn it!
That being said, if I was asked to sum this film up, I'd say that it's an uneven mess of a movie with contrived and deeply flawed storylines, visuals that look like a unicorn suffered a bout of explosive diarrhea over the screen, dialogue that indulges all the worst excesses of its predecessor, a cast of actors that are either way too good for this film or way too shit for any film, and an emotional tone that veers wildly from one extreme to the other, like me trying to drive home after 2 bottles of Jack Daniels. Allow me to illuminate you. Oh, and I'm going to be spoiling the plot here, so consider yourself warned. The movie begins sometime after the events of Endgame. Thor's now out exploring the galaxy with the Guardians. He's back in shape again, and he's finally ready to be the hero he was always meant to be. Except he isn't. Imagine my shock. It turns out that he's lost his passion for battle and adventure, so he quits the Guardians to go and find himself or whatever. How very millennial of him. Anyway, wouldn't you know it, he gets a distress call from Sif. You remember Sif, don't you?
Pathetic.
It turns out that she got her arse handed to her by Gorr the God Killer, who's sworn to destroy all the gods in the universe, and his next target is New Asgard on Earth.
No way!
Wow, what are the odds, eh? Speaking of New Asgard, Valkyrie is now king, which makes no sense to me because you can't be a king if you're not a man, but whatever. The point is, her job isn't exactly the non-stop thrill ride that she'd hoped for. Basically, she's just a bureaucrat mired in red tape and pointless meetings she doesn't care about. Unfortunately, Tessa Thompson is able to convey this emotion perfectly. Luckily, Jane Foster shows up to brighten her day, and by brighten, I mean beg for help. See, it turns out that Jane's got cancer and she only has a few months to live, so she's hoping the Asgardians can use their advanced technology to help her out. But oh no, then Gorr shows up to attack the place, and then Thor shows up to stop him, and there's a big old fight, and Mjolnir reforges itself to transform Jane into CGI Natalie Portperson, because apparently having a terminal illness somehow makes you worthy of wielding it.
Yes, I can definitely smell shite.
Sure, okay. Wait, you're telling me that Mjolnir could reforge itself whenever it wanted? Because that would have saved Thor an awful lot of time and effort in Infinity War, and might actually have prevented the snap altogether. It must have been Kang's will or something. So they managed to fight off Gorr and his army, but oh no, he takes some Asgardian children hostage. Clearly the gang need to rescue them, but in order to do that, they're gonna have to recruit some help. So Thor, Korg, Valkyrie, and CGI Natalie Portperson travel to the God planet, where most of the gods of the universe just kind of hang out. I love how it's totally not confusing that this story has 3 main characters named Thor, Gorr, and Korg.
Not a great plan.
So they find Zeus and ask for his help, but he's like, nah, it'll be fine. I also love how he strips Thor butt naked in front of the entire city, and it's just treated as a big old joke that we should laugh at. Because if this had happened to Valkyrie or CGI Natalie Portperson, it would have been treated as some horrifying traumatic experience that we should have been outraged about. Equality is a funny thing, isn't it? Anyway, since the other gods apparently don't give a shit about self-preservation, Thor and the others head to the Shadow Realm to fight Gorr by themselves. But it turns out it was just a big old trap, you see. What Gorr really wanted was to get his hands on Stormbreaker, so that he could use the Bifrost to open a portal to the centre of the universe, where a giant MacGuffin thing will grant one wish for the first person to get there. Well, that's a convenient setup. Anyway, Gorr the God Killer wants to, kill all the gods in the universe, because apparently one of them let his daughter get killed. Imagine not taking a personal interest in one particular life out of uncountable trillions throughout the universe. You know, I've got a few questions about this one. If the Bifrost allows you to get to the giant MacGuffin thing and have your wish granted, then how come nobody else has ever gone there before? Why did Thor and the others not use it to get there first and wish for the power to stop Gorr, or for Gorr to drop dead, or to have never even existed in the first place? You see the problems it creates when you introduce a mechanism that allows literally anything to happen? Why didn't Thanos kill Thor and use this thing to fulfill his plan instead of doing all that Infinity Stone crap? What does Kang the Conqueror think about all this? How many CGI artists did it take to animate Natalie Portman's arms? Who fucking cares? So they go to the Shadow Realm and fight Gore, but he totally kicks their ass, so Thor turns the kids into mini Thors because apparently that's a thing that he can do. Again, I might suggest that this kind of skill would have been of great use fighting Thanos, but whatever. Then CGI Natalie Portman uses the last of her power to break Gore's evil demon sword before deciding that she's too awesome for this world and dies. Goodbye, CGI Natalie Portman. It's been real. Then Thor convinces Gore to use his wish to bring his dead daughter back to life instead of killing all the gods in the universe. By George, he's a genius. So his daughter comes back to life and then he dies and Thor agrees to look after her and then everything goes back to normal again. And that's it, that's the plot for Love and Thunder. You know, one of my big takeaways from this film was that it really exposes Taika Waititi as a one-trick pony when it comes to setting the emotional tone. His trademark style of showing dark and serious events through a light-hearted comedic lens was undeniably effective in Jojo Rabbit because that film was viewed from the perspective of a small child who couldn't rationalise things any other way. It worked again to a lesser extent in Ragnarok, mostly because after the stodgy, self-important seriousness of Dark World, it was refreshing to see Thor in what was basically a goofy buddy comedy. But the thing is, that's the kind of card you can only really play once. Love and Thunder isn't a story told from a child's point of view, and making it all into a joke isn't new or fun anymore. What it is tired and played out, like an aging rock star half-heartedly performing his greatest hits because it's what's expected of him. Even the jokes and dialogue aren't particularly good this time around, feeling forced and laboured rather than breezy and effortless. And Jesus Christ, at least Ragnarok gave its scenes a little breathing room. When Odin died, it felt impactful because the movie was smart enough to hold off on the jokes for a while and let the emotions sink in. But here, almost every serious scene has to be undercut by some goofy joke or witty put down. It's like trying to deliver the eulogy at your grand's funeral while some drunken asshole lights his farts on fire in the background. And believe me, we've all been there. And what's frustrating is that there's plenty of fertile ground for serious dramatic moments in this movie. Gore's introduction in the first few minutes of the film hit particularly hard and almost lured me into believing this was going to be more than just a breezy action movie with comedic overtones. It's the same story with Jane's cancer, which is presented as more of a thorny problem to be solved rather than a tragic countdown to her inevitable demise. There's no hint of the anger or sadness that a relatively young person would feel at having their life cut short. None of the existential dread of being suddenly confronted with your own mortality. She's as chipper and optimistic while dying of a terminal illness as she was when we met her a decade earlier, and it just feels wrong somehow, like this shit deserves more than just a fleeting mention. There's an almost frantic desperation to turn everything into a joke, and it just feels cheap. It's the same with the visuals, which take everything from Ragnarok and dial it up to 11. Visually, Love and Thunder is a film that I could best describe as an assault upon the senses, and not in a good way. It's so overdone and oversaturated that it was actually starting to give me a headache at times. And if you need an example of this, just take a look at Thor's outfit. It's like it was coloured in by a small child that's just discovered crayons for the first time. Much like the emotional tone, the performances are all over the place. On the plus side, Chris Hemsworth delivers his usual easygoing charm and likability as Thor. He's been doing this shit forever, no matter what kind of ridiculous nonsense the scripts throw at him, and he wears the character like a comfortable old glove at this point. And if there's some kind of award in the movie industry for being a good sport, then Hemsworth absolutely deserves it. He's basically portrayed as a bumbling buffoon for most of the film, constantly fucking things up, trying and failing to have big grandiose heroic moments, and generally acting like a total parody of everything he once was. I know you like your comedy, Taika, but honestly, do you have to mock every single facet of this character? Christian Bale is probably the highlight of the movie for me, bringing a serious, focused intensity and an element of tragedy to Gore that feels like it belongs in a whole other movie. He commands the screen whenever he's around, he's got an understandable goal that he's working towards, and the finale even offers an element of redemption for him. Weirdly, the film even dares to offer a somewhat positive view of fatherhood, portraying him as a loving dad willing to sacrifice his own life for his daughter. At the other end of the spectrum, Tessa Thompson defiantly continues her strategy of upward failure in Hollywood, delivering every single line of dialogue like the actors are doing a read-through for the very first time. Honestly, I'm starting to wonder if this is some kind of epic piss take from her and Waititi, like they're trying to see how bad they can get before someone has the balls to call her out on it. Not that the script asks much from her anyway, she's barely in the movie, and even when she's in a scene, she spends most of her time standing around in the background, making it pretty obvious the writers couldn't think of anything for her character to do. There's also Korg, who's basically Taika Waititi's excuse for being in the movie, hence the excessive amount of screen time he gives him. Wow, you're awfully generous to yourself, aren't you, Taika? He was tolerable enough as a one-shot deal in Ragnarok, but now the arsehole's fucking everywhere, proving the point that you absolutely can have too much of a good thing. And I can't shake the feeling that it's nothing more than Waititi's ego getting the better of him. And as for CGI Natalie Portman, well, she's definitely in the movie, I can say that much. It's pretty common knowledge that she left the franchise after Dark World because she was bored of playing Jane Foster and only agreed to come back for the money. The chance to do something different with the character. The movie plays just about every trick in the book to get you to like her and portray her as Thor's equal in every way, even though he's been fighting and training for thousands of years and Hemsworth is literally twice her size. She looks kind of awkward and uncomfortable in her bulky armour, she can't fight in any meaningful way, and overall, watching her try to play a goddess of thunder is about as believable as watching Brie Larson trying to act like a realistic human being. On the plus side, they at least had the balls to kill her off, which genuinely surprised me considering how much emphasis they put on her in the trailers. Although in retrospect, trying to launch her as a replacement for Thor when Portman herself is 3 years older than Hemsworth wouldn't make a whole lot of sense. No long-term franchise potential there, Disney. Her role is more of a passing the torch kind of situation, rounding out her character arc and letting her go out on a high note rather than just vanishing from the narrative like before. Interestingly enough, neither of these strong female characters are used to humiliate Thor like in Ragnarok. There's no particular girl boss moments where they totally outshine him, berate him, or make him look generally useless and incompetent. He can do all that by himself, thank you very much. Seriously though, both characters kind of get their arses kicked by Gore, leaving Thor to more or less save the day single-handed. Don't worry though, by the end of the movie, there's a younger and probably cheaper strong female character waiting in the wings to become the new Thor once Hemsworth eventually stands down. Ultimately, Love and Thunder feels like a bit of an exercise in treading water, taking its main character on a loud and colourful adventure that basically puts him right back where he was at the beginning. It's a perfect example of a franchise mired in its own inertia, recycling old ideas and rehashing previously successful strategies, meandering forward with no sense of direction or clear reason for why it even still exists. And it proves once and for all that even a winning hand can only be played so many times. Anyway, that's all I've got for today. Go away now.